welcome to another episode of the Chaos Chronicles. I'm Jess, and we are back today with Trent.
Hello.
Thanks for coming back for another
Thanks
one.
for having me for another one. I'm excited. This is fun.
Absolutely. You're welcome back at any time.
Cool. I'll take you up on that.
So, today we are going to be talking about an alien abduction.
Right up my alley.
Yep. Which is exactly what Trent's been looking forward to.
Yep.
Before we get started on that, though, make sure to go look in our description. We have all of our social medias linked down below. So go check us out and give us a follow and subscribe. All right. So today we are going to be diving into one of the most iconic and controversial stories in UFO history, the abduction of Barney and Betty Hill.
Classic.
Which I, again, have never heard of, but
But me, being an aficionado of all things paranormal and alien, I know this case fairly well. So this is kind of one of the first cases in American history that really took off and got a lot of attention, and a lot more than just people being dismissed as wackos. A lot of people also took them seriously. So this is kind of a defining first alien abduction case in American history. So this is a good one to start with.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't know much about the paranormal realm.
Well, you're going to after we're done with all these. So
yeah, there's going to be a lot more coming. So starting with some background on what time period we're in, it is September 19th, 1961, and the world basically is in the grip of the Cold War. The space race is heating up, and the UFO sightings are becoming a cultural phenomenon. In the United States, people are both fascinated and terrified by the idea of beings being from another world. What are your, I guess we've never talked about this. What are your thoughts? Do you think aliens exist?
I do.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means.
Like what capacity?
Yeah,
Right? Yeah.
and I don't know if aliens are where they're from or any of that stuff. But I do know that or at least I believe that there's so many cases of people, and some of them have been false or debunked or anything. But there's so many cases that it would be hard for all of that to be made up. So. And I think by this time, now that even the U.S. government, is talking about UAPs and actually doing congressional hearings and everything, we've actually seen video from military jets and things.
Yep.
It just lends a little more credence. So yeah, I with all these things, a lot of them I believe in them, but I don't have a definitive answer of who the aliens are, where they came from, what their purpose is, or any of those things. So
yeah.
Hopefully at some point we find that out in a peaceful way, but
peaceful.
Yeah. In a peaceful, kind, neighborly, universal way.
Yeah, right.
But I don't know.
Yeah.
What about you? What's your take?
I don't know. I'm like in between. I could go either way.
Yeah.
Like I could see all this stuff being true. I could see like the government hiding something like that from us, but also like I could also see it just being like a fun story.
Sure. So. Well, we'll do more of these and we'll get you on board.
Okay. So science fiction is booming at this time, and reports of flying saucers are making headlines. Barney and Betty Hill are an interracial couple living in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. An unusual and courageous pairing for the time, given the racial tension of the early 60s. Barney is 39 and is a postal worker and a World War II veteran and a pretty much no-nonsense guy. And Betty is 41, a social worker, very curious, but more open to unconventional ideas. They're active in their community, involved in civil rights, and by all accounts, they're just an ordinary couple living a quiet life. That is, until they decide to take a spontaneous road trip to Montreal and Quebec for a belated honeymoon. On their way back home, driving through the White Mountains of New Hampshire, something extraordinary happens. Around 10:30 p.m., the Hills are cruising along Route 3, a lonely stretch of road surrounded by dense forest and towering mountains. Their dachshund, Delzy, Delzy is in the back seat. Delsey.
Good old Delzy in the back seat.
Delzy in the back seat. The sky is clear and the stars are bright, and there's a sense of calm. That is until Betty notices something strange. She spots a bright light in the sky, moving in a way that doesn't look like any plane or star she's ever seen. It's zigzagging, darting around, and getting closer. She points it out to Barney, who's driving. At first, he brushed it off, saying that it's probably a satellite or a plane. But as the light grows brighter and seems to follow their car, he starts to get uneasy. They stop the car a few times to get a better look. Barney grabs a pair of binoculars that they have in the car and steps out to observe. What he sees chills him to the bone. A craft, shaped like a pancake or a disc, with glowing lights and what appears to be windows. And through those windows, he claimed he sees figures, humanoid but not quite human. Barney later described these beings as wearing a dark uniform and cap, with one figure seeming to stare directly at him. He felt an overwhelming sense of fear, like he was being watched, almost controlled. Panicked, he runs back to the car and tells Betty that they need to get out of there. They speed off, but the light keeps pace with them. Then things get even stranger. The Hills report hearing a series of beeping or buzzing sounds, and a feeling of drowsiness overtakes them. Their memories of the next few hours are fuzzy and fragmented. They later realize that they've lost about 2 hours of time that they can't account for. When they finally arrive home in Portsmouth around dawn, they're shaken, confused, and their clothes are dirty and torn. That would be terrifying.
That would be terrifying. And they in the initial part of it, they had no recollection beyond that of of driving, of getting out. He looked at the binoculars, saw this incredible sight, get back in the car, and then they're just driving home.
Yeah.
And they just are kind of like, well, that was weird, but now we're driving home. And so they didn't have any idea of abduction or any contact with the aliens or anything, which I think is interesting.
Yeah.
But I know that Betty, her dress was ripped and torn and dirty. And so that is weird too. If she just got out of the car to look at the weird thing and then gets back in the car and drives home, you wouldn't rip your dress or have any of that stuff. And I guess there's even when they kind of came back to, I guess, not that they ever really went out of consciousness, but when they were back in the car, I guess Barney had made a comment to Betty, well, that was strange or something. And then Betty said something about like, well, do you believe in aliens or something? And he was like, no, that was, he like dismissed it, know. And again, like you said earlier, he was kind of a no nonsense guy, war veteran, and so he kind of dismissed it. And I forgot his exact quote, but he said something like, oh, I don't know, it's just kind of strange, but whatever. And they just drive home. So it's strange that they had this terrifying kind of experience, and then all of a sudden they're just like drowsy, and then they're at home and they're just like, well, yeah, that was a weird drive.
Everything's fine.
Yeah, we're fine. We're
just
back at home.
Can't remember the last 2 hours.
Yeah, and our clothes are all ripped up, and we just, but we're home, so
that's all that matters now, right? Yeah. So their watches have stopped working. Betty's dress has a strange pinkish powder on it. Barney's shoes are scuffed, and he has an odd pain in his lower back. And even Delzy, their dog, seems agitated.
I was wondering what Delzy was up to, because you'd think the dog would have been through it too. So
I'm sure. I'm sure Delzy. The dog remembers it, though.
Yeah, true.
Which is very unfortunate.
It is. Yeah, nobody's gotten the dog side of the story. So
I know.
Poor Delzy.
Poor Delzy. At first, they try to make sense of themselves. Betty, who's more open to the idea of UFOs, starts reading books about extraterrestrial encounters. Barney, being the skeptic, wants to believe that it was just a hallucination or even some sort of misunderstanding. The gaps in their memory nags at them, though. Why can't they remember those 2 hours? What happened on the road? They report the site to the Air Force through Project Blue Book, the government's UFO investigation program. The official explanation is they probably saw Jupiter or a weather balloon. The Hills aren't convinced. Betty also contacts the National Investigation Committee on Aerial Phenomena, a civilian UFO research group, which takes their story more seriously. Word of their experience started to spread. By October of 1961, they're meeting with UFO researchers and even a psychiatrist because the stress is taking a toll on them. They have nightmares, anxiety, and vivid dreams about being taken aboard a craft. Betty dreams of being examined by strange beings, while Barney's dreams are darker, filled with fear and helplessness. In 1963, the Hills seek help from Dr. Benjamin Simon, a respected psychiatrist in Boston who specialized in hypnotic regression. Dr. Simon isn't a UFO believer. He's skeptical and thinks that their experience might be a shared delusion or a traumatic response. But he agrees to help them uncover what happened during those missing 2 hours. Under hypnosis, conducted separately to avoid influencing each other, Barney and Betty recounted a detailed and eerie, consistent story. They describe being stopped on the road by a group of humanoid beings, short with large heads, gray skin, and huge wraparound eyes. Which, is there like an AI generated picture of this?
I don't
Like,
know.
I
We
want
should
to.
we should see. I think it kind of, from the pictures I've seen, it kind of fits like the gray alien like
Okay, yeah.
persona or the archetype. Um, let's see if they have a picture of it. But I think it does kind of fit the classic, and I think this was also one of the things that one of the cases that actually kind of put that archetype of an alien into the
Oh, okay.
public consciousness of
Mm-hmm.
being the gray alien, big heads, big eyes, all that stuff, slight body. So yeah, I don't see anything for pictures here, but
That's unfortunate.
yeah.
Wanted some cool AI pictures. So these beings, they say, communicated telepathically, telling the Hills to not be afraid. That's terrifying in
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah. If
You're telling
somebody's
me,
communicating telepathically to me,
yeah,
that's going to freak me out.
yeah,
That just alone is, I don't care what you tell me. If you're like, oh, this is normal, I'm like, no, this is not normal.
it's
This is
not
not
normal.
how we communicate with each other. Your mouth better be moving if you're telling me something.
Oh gosh. The Hills claim that they were taken aboard a disc shaped craft and subjected to medical examinations. Betty describes a needle being inserted into her navel, a procedure that she's told is a pregnancy test.
Hmm.
And Barney recalls being physically examined with samples taken from his skin and body. Both described the beings as clinical, emotionless, like scientists studying specimens. Betty also shares a particularly fascinating detail. During her examination, she is shown a star map, which she was told shows the being's home system. She later drew this map under hypnosis, and years later, an amateur astronomer named Marjorie Fish would claim it resembles the Zeta Reticuli star system, which is about 39 light years from Earth.
Which is interesting too, that
Yeah,
because you think if it was just random, I mean, Betty Hill didn't know about that star system. I don't know
no.
what that star system looks like.
Mm-mm.
So it's weird that she drew that under hypnotic regression, and then somebody actually found a star map that we
Yeah.
know based on NASA and everything that
Mm-hmm.
that matches that area.
It
Like
exists.
that's a weird coincidence to me. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if that's been like independently verified by multiple people, but that's a big part of the story, is that this
Right.
lady did find where that actually matches up
Mm-hmm.
with the star system. And apparently that system was one that they had seen before could have life possibly on it, had the conditions
Interesting.
to possibly
Yeah.
have life, or at least that's what
Hmm.
NASA and stuff thought. So that lends a little bit more credibility even to it. But it
Hmm.
is weird that they showed her where they were from supposedly, and then she was able to reproduce that under hypnosis.
Right.
That's very strange.
If it is real, maybe they assumed because they're going to wipe their memories
Hmm.
that they just won't. So why not tell them?
Well, and they did wipe their memories pretty effectively. I
Yeah.
mean, they had no idea about any of this until they both started having dreams about it,
Right.
which I think is interesting too, that they had no conscious memory of it. But then when they went to sleep, those memories, if that's what they were,
Mm-hmm.
started to kind of bubble up out of their
Mm-hmm.
subconscious, and they started to kind of remember that.
Well, it's like even with the hypnotic state too. I know I've read several things where it's like victims, a trauma response can be
Hmm.
you literally forget.
Hmm.
And through hypnosis, you can even find little details that you wouldn't normally remember.
Yeah,
Like,
even if you were vividly aware of the situation at the time,
yeah.
you block some of that stuff out, or
Mm-hmm.
even just normal everyday life. You're not remembering every little detail of every situation that you're in,
Yeah.
but your brain is still processing all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And so under hypnosis, it seems like they can pull some of that out from wherever it's being stored in some
Right.
part of your subconscious, which
Yeah.
is interesting.
It's really weird, but really cool.
Hmm. Yeah.
And that photo of the star map will be on our Instagram, so go check it out. Dr. Simon, well intrigued, never fully endorsed the abduction story. He suggests their memories could be a mix of dreams, stress, and cultural influences like sci fi movies about aliens. But the Hills stand by their account, and their story gained a lot of traction. Like, we're here today talking about
Yeah.
it still, so.
And I think it was interesting that they went through different waves of what they wanted for publicity. They wanted to get to the
Yeah.
bottom of it, and then that generated some publicity. But then they were even at odds. Like I think Betty Hill wanted to solve it more and really like get the story out. Barney, he was kind of a no nonsense guy. He also was very, as you said, into civil rights and was doing a lot of good work with that. And so he
Mm-hmm.
didn't want that work to be compromised by the fact that he was abducted by aliens supposedly,
Right.
so he didn't want to lose any credibility. Whereas Betty was like, no, let's figure this out and get the story out.
Keep
So
going. Yeah.
um,
By 1965, the Hills story broke into the mainstream. A Boston newspaper publishes a detailed account, and soon they're the subject of national fascination. In 1966, John Fuller's book, The Interrupted Journey, becomes a bestseller and cements their place in UFO lore. Their story inspires TV movies like 1975's The UFO Incident, starring James Earl Jones and Estelle Parson, and I have no idea who these people are,
you
but
don't know who James Earl Jones is? Oh, he was like Darth Vader's voice. And
oh,
have you seen Sandlot?
no.
Oh, you got to watch Sandlot. He was in that.
I've watched like no movies, is what I've come to find. Oh, why did we lose your camera? But with fame comes scrutiny. Skeptics argue that the Hills story is a product of their time, a mix of Cold War paranoia, racial stress as an interracial couple in a time where that wasn't okay, and or seen as okay, sorry. Um, and exposure to UFO stories in the media. Some point out that Betty's dreams, which she wrote down before hypnosis, closely resembled hypnotic accounts, suggesting her imagination sharpened the narrative. Other notes that the Hills story shares similarities with sci fi tropes like the 1953 film Invaders from Mars, which I know I've seen a long, long time ago, but couldn't tell you anything about
It
that.
didn't inspire any alien abductions in your mind after watching it?
Mm, no. no, not really.
So it didn't work on you then, anyways.
Didn't work on me. Others, on the other hand, believers argue the consistency of their accounts, the physical evidence, and their lack of motive for lying to make the story credible.
And I think that's one of the biggest things is that under hypnotic regression, they didn't know what each other was saying. And they both had very, very similar stories, almost like
Yeah,
exactly the same, besides the fact that they supposedly were separated on the craft and had different things done to them. But the actual story of how they got up to the craft and then back and all that stuff
was the
was almost
same.
exactly the same. So unless they somehow rehearsed it beforehand, but the whole idea of the hypnotic regression was it was pulling things out that didn't know or had never told anybody or
Hmm.
never thought of. So that seems weird to me that they could stress or
Yeah.
influences from a movie or something like that would give them almost the exact same story.
And isn't, correct me if I'm wrong, but like when you're making up a story like something like this, isn't it pretty unusual for consistency?
Mm-hmm. Even just amongst your own story,
Yeah.
like it's really hard to tell the same story that you made up two times, three times, five times in a row without
Yeah.
having different things. So the fact that they've been consistent the whole time in their story is probably hard to do if they were just
Yeah.
influenced or making it up.
Yeah. The Hills didn't seek fame or fortune, which is another
Mm-hmm.
big thing to where like they might not be lying.
And if anything, Barney didn't want attention for it. I mean, they
Right.
wanted to get to the bottom of it, but he did not want attention for it. And I guess when the famous book came out about it a few years later, it really threw their family like into upheaval and
Mm,
everything, and it was really stressful for them. And they weren't excited about that. They weren't like, oh, sweet, we get more attention. They were
right.
really upset, and it was really hard on them. So you would think if they wanted attention, that they would love that. So
Right. But they hated it.
yeah, but they hated all that
Yeah.
spotlight.
The case also raises deeper questions. If they were abducted, why were they abducted? Were they chosen randomly, or was there something special about them? And what about the star map? Is it proof of extraterrestrial origins, or is this just a coincidence? Barney ended up passing away in 1969 at age 46, and Betty died in 2004 at 85. They never wavered in their belief that they were abducted, and even skeptics challenged them, and they remained the same. Their story paved the way for other abduction cases, shaping how we think about extraterrestrial encounters in terms like missing time and gray beans.
The other thing I think that's interesting is when they went to the Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, the people that interviewed them, they weren't just like, "Oh, you guys are kooky people making this up." Like they really said. I saw an interview with Betty Hill where she said that they really listened to them and asked like probing questions, and they
Mm,
believed them about things. And so it wasn't like people are like, "Okay, you guys are just making up a hoax to get out of here." They
yeah.
actually, a lot of the people even in the military, really wanted to get to the bottom of their story too. Which you would think if it was had clear inconsistencies or like had hoax things about that, that they wouldn't care about that. And even somebody had gone back and looked at other UFO sightings because almost always when there's an abduction case or something where people come into contact,
Mm-hmm.
there's people around the area that see stuff. And I guess within that night and the next night, there had been like 12 reported sightings of UFOs around that area. And so that from other people who didn't even know Betty and Barney Hill and didn't even
Yeah.
know that they had come out with the story yet because they hadn't yet. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think that lends some credence to their story too, that other people in the area saw things in the sky that didn't
Yeah.
make sense too around the
Mm-hmm.
exact same time. So I don't know. There is a lot of evidence with that, and even the clothing being ripped and all that too.
Yeah.
And apparently, they've analyzed Betty Hill's dress, and there was like a stain that would have been right over the navel area, that looked like it was like a
Oh,
bodily fluid type, like blood or pus or
yeah.
something. And it would have been right over that stomach navel area, which is
Interesting.
where she claimed was where they put the needle in.
You're right.
And it was painful and everything. So there was some physical evidence. Their car, I guess, had like weird little swirls on it after.
Oh,
They showed neighbors and people and stuff too. And even that, people, like even skeptics were like, I don't know how they would have like made those weird little swirls and pockmarks on their car.
interesting. Yeah.
Um, so there is some physical evidence too that also lends some credibility to it.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know for sure. It's always hard when the case hinges on like regression therapy to
Mm-hmm.
tell their story, but it seems like when you take the totality of the whole thing, it seems more than just a hoax or coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
So
I know. I know. I can't fully say like nothing happened. Like I don't think nothing happened.
sure. Whereas a lot of cases, as you dig deeper into them, you're like, yeah,
Yeah.
there's too many ways to explain that away
Yeah.
easily. In this case, it doesn't seem like that's
No.
possible. So
No, there's just too many things, and like you said, the way that Betty and Barney, like, they had the same story but they
mm-hmm.
weren't in the same room.
Mm-hmm. So are you a believer yet?
Not yet, not yet.
No, and honestly, this case, I think it's not incontrovertible,
Yeah.
but it was one of the first big cases that really put this stuff on spotlight. That had decent evidence for it, that at least
Mm-hmm.
something happened, and so I think that's why this case is important. There are other cases that maybe have more evidence,
Right.
to
Sure.
show things. But this one I think was so important because it wasn't able, even to this day, nobody's been able to really debunk this
Mm-hmm.
story. And there's so many things, even like the star map
Right,
that
right.
she just drew up from, I think it was from the dream that she drew up the star map.
I
Or was
think
it during regression? It was one of them.
it was one of them, and I don't recall which
Yeah,
now.
but even that, the fact that that could be traced to an actual galaxy that looks like that is interesting.
Right. Yeah,
So,
because how would she know that? I mean, it's not like even like today we can go on Google, but
mhm.
like we're gonna pick a random constellation and then just
Yeah,
jot it
back
down. Like
in the early 60s, they had like
they didn't have
encyclopedias
that.
and stuff, and they
Yeah.
didn't have encyclopedias that had star maps of distant galaxies in them. So and even I think the lady who analyzed it, it was after the fact, years later. It
Right.
wasn't immediately after. So
Hmm.
it wasn't like it was a galaxy that had been seen in movies or TV or anything that she would have a frame of reference for. So
Right.
I think that's kind of interesting too.
Hmm.
So
This is definitely an interesting one, and it's a good way to step into the extraterrestrial, supernatural
hmm.
realm.
Yeah, definitely, and it is kind of the one that started a lot of it in America. People would
Yeah.
see things, but as far as actual contact or abduction cases, this is kind of the one that started it all. So it's a
Hmm.
good one to start with. So
Yeah. Well, I still don't know if I believe in aliens yet, but
we'll get you there.
maybe eventually. Well, is there anything else you'd like to talk about on this case?
No, I think that sums it up pretty well.
All
So
right. Well, thank you so much for joining us this week. Make sure that you do go down into our description and check out our social medias. And we will see you next week for another Who Knows What Wednesday. Bye.